The cost of doing business in the BVI has been a long-standing complaint. Are the voices being heard? And if not, why? On the big story today is the Vice President of the Hospitality at the BVI CCHA, Chauncey Klein, and she's going to help us understand what's at the core of these concerns. Recently, the chairman of the BVI CCA appealed for a public-private task force to tackle the heart of this cost of doing business problem in the BVI. What exactly are these challenges that businesses in the BVI have been facing for some time now?
Well, definitely from the hospitality perspective, the tourism industry, we recognize over the past year and a half there has been an onslaught of new fees, proposed increases, and as you began to add it up, we recognize, is this sustainable? We recognize also that there's been an effort by government to generate more revenue. But the question is, do we generate more revenue or do we become more relevant? And so the BVI CCHA hospitality industry has been convening because we recognize over the past year and a half there's been about six new efforts to increase those fees. For example, we've had, of course, NHI, of course we have pension, we have payroll tax, but as of late, the hotel accommodation tax, which went into effect in February. We've had the alcohol and tobacco tax that was also increased in June of last year. There is a proposed fee that's coming up with the amendment of the Liquor License Act. There's also an additional fee proposed for the new cruising permit fee and also the trade and license fee.
And then there's the environmental levy that's also
and
coming.
The environmental levy. So again, in some form or fashion, that has an implication on our industry. And what we're saying is not only why, but the timing, not only the measure of it, but the timing of it. I'm quite sure you're aware in doing business, there's planning, there are budgets, and you plan accordingly. And what we're saying as a hospitality industry with all of these fees, what overall is the master plan for tourism? As we've been speaking over the past few months, tourism is everybody's business, but what is the long-range plan for the industry? Without a plan, how can the people follow? And then with all of these revenues, how will they be spent? And I'm just not clear as an industry if we've heard the government articulate how these funds will help to improve the overall forecast and outlook for our industry. So there are many concerns. I wish we had time to drill down even with the work permit increase. So there are layers and layers of concerns. And so the question is, when do we come together and begin to understand how we really position the territory to be a vibrant tourism industry? Many of the persons in the hospitality industry are crying out about the industry has taken a hit this year. We are ending up our peak season, and many of us are feeling the effects that the economy is not as strong as is being purported. So we do have some concerns, and I think now is the time to make sure that we come together and begin to understand how we move forward.
All right, you raised two major issues that I want to delve into shortly, that of the master plan and the work permit situation.
Yes.
But many persons will say, listen, this is a government one and it's a government of a very small territory. So how else do you expect the government to make money if not to tax the businesses that do exist? So since it is, I'm sure it is that the BVI CCHA isn't saying don't tax and don't charge fees, but the how is it that the BVI CCHA, and particularly from your standpoint, from the hospitality sector, would prefer that the government goes about this so that it not only benefits their coffers, but the businesses are incentivized, and not just incentivized, but are able to compete effectively and efficiently?
Very important question. Number one, you can't talk revenue without talking cost, all right? And in any smart business, you look at not only how you're going to generate revenue, but how are you going to reduce costs? And I don't think government has articulated on their side, how will costs be reduced in order to improve efficiency. You can grow to a size where you're trying to meet and match, the need, But the question becomes, when you realize you've grown bigger than you need to be, you have to also make some choices in terms of cutting costs. So again, the industry is not against generating revenue, but that revenue should be in concert with a long-range plan. How will these funds be reinvested in the industry? And I think that's the conversation that has not been had with the industry. Maybe those discussions are happening at the governmental level, but they're not happening. And then the second question is the measure. Okay, how do you decide that you increase work permit fees by 200%? Okay, and how do you decide when it is best appropriate to implement those fees based on the impact that it will have not only on the business but on the people? Because we are the economy. I mean, when you look at the small and medium-sized businesses, we are the heartbeat of the economy. And if cost is increasing, then we have to decide, where do we cut first? Do we cut people? Do we cut service? And we know service is a challenge in the territory. So how do we market the destination? So all of those factors are implications when you make a decision around increasing fees and taxes.
Let's stick with this work permit
Okay.
fee issue for a little bit, because I understand that there are some resorts who have even gone as far as seeking to petition the government regarding this work permit system. The minister said that shortly after the announcement that it's now being reviewed, but reviewed with a view to what exactly? What exactly does the business sector want the minister to come back to them with that will be palatable?
I believe that the initial consultation, there was another structure proposed. And I do believe they did hear us that that structure proposed was just not, it was not comprehensive in scope. It did not reflect the various industries in terms of what had been purported. So they came back with a more progressive scheme, which I believe and the industry believe it needs more work. So let's not hastily implement something that has not been well thought out, analyzed. So we proposed a working group. And this working group, the stakeholders group, would sit with government and began to flesh through what's a palatable approach, what should be the true measure of that approach, and the timing of that approach. And that's good government. Good government listens. And we recognize that everything rises and falls on leadership. So good leadership says, you know what, yes, we need to take this measure, but let's hold up. Let's make sure it's well thought out and that we have buy-in from the people that it will impact.
All right, let's go to this master plan.
Yes.
I'm familiar with other countries having a master plan to guide their tourism sectors. And so I know that this is a big deal and a good deal. How on earth it is that the BVI can have the tourism sector as one of the key pillars of its economy and there not be a master plan?
Well, we're raising the same question. We've sent letters to the Premier, and we also sent letters to the BVI Tours Board, who did respond, and we've had some discussions. Listen, this is a sense of urgency. We have to decide who we want to become. How relevant do we want to become? And how does tourism touch every sector of the economy? Tourism is about tour operators, taxi drivers, it's about restaurants, it's about hotel villas. It touches education, the workforce. So what we're proposing is let's take a phased approach to developing a master plan, which is an action plan. It's not a plan designed to put on a shelf. It's applying to work the vision. So once we have a vision of who we want to become, then we began to connect the dots. And so what we're saying to government, we want to work with you to connect the dots. And so we are meeting next week to continue to champion the cause, because we have to understand what's going to be the true pillar of tourism. Is it cruise ship tourism? I hope not. Will it be yachting?
Cuba is coming up.
Listen, absolutely. So I believe we need to continue to diversify the product and work smarter. And I think we can do that together.
And what's one of the big, I know that there are a lot of areas for diversification because you spoke about some of them.
Yes.
But at that recent BVI CCHA luncheon, two key areas were highlighted. One, you spoke about the workforce crisis that exists in the BVI, that the BVI CCHA is working with the relevant parties to improve.
Yes.
And then there's the issue of Airbnb, which your guest speaker spoke of. It should be looked at as a threat, but more of as an opportunity for collaboration or for revenue in order to
Absolutely.
expand the industry. So tell me how the BVI-CCHA is seeking to get those two woven in.
Well, interesting enough, just yesterday, the VI consortium paper ran an article where Airbnb and the government had just reached a deal where they will now be taxing those properties that list through them and actually book through them. That's revenue. So according to the speaker, Frank Comito from CHTA, he said we have about 600 properties right now in the BVI that's not sharing in the burden. So we have an opportunity, I believe it's a true opportunity, to help generate revenue through that stream and to lessen the burden on the faithful ones who continue to feed into that revenue collection system. So that's one. Secondly, the second measure you talked about in terms of workforce. We are getting ready to convene a workforce roundtable because it is essential and critical that we have a workforce that's viable with skills that can offer the level of service that our visitors expect. You cannot squeeze blood out of a turnip if the blood ain't there, you know. So our goal is, I use that analogy just to say, we believe we do have some great potential workforce here, but how do we grow it? How do we educate it? How do we infuse the kind of resources that are necessary to help us to compete with Cuba and all the other destinations that are and do have a strategy within their economic plan for workforce development?
All right, and with that, we have to end it right there on the big story. That's as much as we have time for. Thank you very much for joining me, Chauncey, and I do look forward to speaking to you again in the future more about this and other issues.
Thank you.
That's
so much.
it for this week on The Big Story. Remember, check us out on Facebook, YouTube, and of course on jtvlive.net.